Welcome to the Peak Performance and Peak Satisfaction podcast with Master Executive Coach Sherry Gregoff. Sherry helps business people perform better, get rewarded handsomely, and actually enjoy their work. After having her own career turnaround, she now helps other high-powered business professionals experience the same. Join the movement to work differently.
Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here. Today's topic is one that almost every corporate leader encounters at some point in their career: the forced bell curve. Whether you're the manager responsible for giving the ratings or the employee receiving one, there's a good chance you've experienced the emotions that come with this process. Maybe you've looked across your team and thought, I have a great group of people. I don't think anyone deserves to be at the bottom. Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of a lower rating after what felt like a really good year. If that's happened to you, you're not alone. I've coached leaders on both sides of this conversation, and I've lived it myself. Before we jump in, I want to shout out one of my clients who had a win in this area. Here's what she shared with me. Sherry helped me review my team members objectively, so that the performance ratings help them understand the gravity of areas for development, for motivation to take action on them before year end. This client realized that by leading with empathy, she was often tempering her message with her team members. The team was solid, as were their results, but there was still opportunity left on the table. We worked through objective ways to evaluate talent, knowing that grading everyone as solid performers at mid-year wasn't going to be enough. In the end, the final performance ratings helped underscore the development areas with individuals. After role-playing these conversations, she was able to relay the feedback without the team members feeling surprised or disenfranchised, but instead incentivized to apply themselves and improve. I see victories like this across my clients, and I've experienced the same lessons throughout my own career. That's why I'm excited to share today's topic with you. Let's jump in and get you on your way to experiencing this also. Every performance review season, I hear many of the same questions. Why do companies even do this with the forced bell curve? Why can't managers just rate people honestly? If someone has to end up in the bottom bucket, isn't the whole thing unfair and rigged? These are fair questions. Today, I don't want to debate whether companies should use forced ratings. Reasonable people can disagree on that. Instead, I want to help you understand why these systems exist, where they tend to break down, and most importantly, how great leaders navigate them. Because here's what I've learned. You won't always get to choose the systems in which you work, but you always get to choose how you lead within them. And that's where I want to spend our time today. Before we talk about what managers should do, let's start by looking at this from the organization's perspective. I think that's something many people skip. When we don't understand why a process exists, it's easy to assume the worst. Maybe leadership doesn't trust us managers. Maybe HR wants to make everyone's life difficult. Maybe the company is simply trying to save money on bonuses. Now, I'm sure there are organizations where some of those things play a role, but that's not the original purpose of the forced bell curve. So let's do a little thought exercise together. Imagine you're not the manager anymore. Imagine you're sitting in the executive meeting where this process is being discussed. It's the end of year. Every manager across the company has submitted performance reviews. Maybe there's 500 employees. Maybe there are 5,000. The ratings are all compiled into one report for you. The executive team begins reviewing the results, and something catches everyone's attention. Almost everyone has been rated as exceeding expectations. At first glance, that sounds like fantastic news. You think, wow, We must have hired incredibly well. Then someone asks a simple question. If almost everyone exceeded expectations, what exactly do our expectations mean? Think about it. If every child in a classroom receives an A+, what does the grade actually tell you? Not much. The grade no longer distinguishes one level of performance from another. The same thing happens in organizations. Performance ratings aren't just report cards. Organizations use them to make decisions. Who receives the largest bonus? Who gets promoted? Who's ready to lead the next major initiative? Who should be included in succession planning? Who would benefit from additional coaching? If everyone receives essentially the same rating, it becomes very difficult to answer those questions. That's the problem the forced bell curve was designed to solve. The idea is actually rooted in meritocracy. The thinking goes something like this. If someone is consistently creating extraordinary value, recognize it, reward it, encourage more of it. If someone is performing well but has opportunities to grow, help them grow. And if someone is consistently struggling despite coaching and support, address it before it becomes a much larger issue. When you hear it explained that way, you can understand the intention. Whether you agree with the implementation or not, it is trying to distinguish performance so that organizations can make better decisions. On paper, it's a thoughtful idea. Then it meets real life. Because real life is messy. Managers don't lead names on a spreadsheet. They lead people. People they've hired. People they've coached. People they've celebrated. People they've watched become parents. People who've worked late nights beside them. People they've helped through difficult seasons of life. And suddenly someone says, now rank them. That's where everything becomes much more complicated. Managers don't struggle with this because they don't know how to evaluate performance. They struggle because they care. In fact, I'd argue that the managers who wrestle with the forced bell curve the most are usually the ones who care the most about their people. Think about your own team for a minute. You probably know who's taking care of an aging parent. Who's navigating a difficult health challenge? Who's raising young children? Who's coming into work every day despite something difficult going on at home? You know who stayed up late to help a teammate, who stepped up during a crisis, who finally found their confidence this year, who worked incredibly hard to overcome a weakness. You don't just see employees, you see people. So when performance review season arrives, you're not simply assigning ratings. You're evaluating people you've invested in all year long. That's what makes it hard. I remember a manager who kept a cartoon pinned to the wall in her office. The caption said, "We've been instructed to lower performance ratings. Would you like us to make people perform worse or simply rate them worse?" It always made me laugh. But like most good humor, there was some truth behind it. Many leaders feel like they've already accomplished the objective the organization was trying to achieve. They didn't ignore poor performance. They addressed it. They coached through it. Sometimes they had difficult conversations. Sometimes they moved someone into a different role. Sometimes they made the painful decision that someone wasn't the right fit for the organization. These are not easy conversations. Good managers don't avoid them. So by the time performance reviews arrive, they're looking at a team that really might be performing well, not because they've lowered the bar, but because they've spent the entire year helping people rise to it. Then someone says, now put one of them in the bottom bucket. And that's where the tension begins. It's usually followed by a negotiation. Managers push back. HR pushes back. Senior leaders push back. Everyone is trying to solve what feels like an impossible puzzle. Eventually, some managers decide they have no choice but to work around the process. I've seen a few different versions of this over the years. The first one usually sounds like this. A manager sits down with an employee and says, "I want you to know, I don't really agree with this rating. I was forced to give it to you." I completely understand why a manager would say that. They're trying to preserve the relationship. They're trying to soften the disappointment. They're trying to communicate, "I'm still in your corner." The intention is good. The impact usually is not. Let's put ourselves in the employee's shoes. Imagine your manager says that to you. What are you likely to hear? "My manager doesn't really have any influence. The system is unfair. My work wasn't actually evaluated. My future is out of my hands." And if you're a really strong performer, another thought might creep in. If my own manager can't accurately recognize my contributions, why would I build my career here? See how quickly the conversation changes? The manager was trying to protect trust. Instead, they unintentionally weakened it, not because they cared too much, because they gave away their own credibility. One of the responsibilities of leadership is owning difficult conversations, even when you didn't create the system, even when you don't completely agree with every part of it. Your team needs to believe that you are helping them navigate reality, not apologizing for reality. I've also seen another approach. Sometimes managers decide the process itself isn't fair, so they try to make it fair. Maybe everyone takes a turn receiving the lower rating. Maybe the team informally rotates who ends up in that bucket from year to year. Again, I understand the intention. No one wants one person carrying the burden every year. But think about the message it sends. If performance ratings rotate regardless of performance, what exactly are we rewarding? What incentive is there to stretch, to improve, to contribute more? Now, before you misunderstand me, I'm not saying every implementation of the bell curve is good. Far from it. I've seen organizations use it incredibly well. I've also seen organizations use it terribly. What I'm saying is this. If the process exists and you find yourself operating within it, don't make it less meaningful by disconnecting it from actual performance. That's not helping your people. It's confusing them. So before we spend a lot of emotional energy debating a rating, I think there are 3 questions every leader should ask. Question number 1, does this rating actually matter? And by that I mean, does it directly affect compensation, promotion decisions, future opportunities, employment? Because I've seen organizations where the answer is absolutely yes. The rating carries real consequences. If that's your organization, then it deserves careful thought and honest conversations. But I've also seen businesses where the rating has taken on a life of its own. Everyone goes through the exercise, the forms are completed, the meetings happen. Then compensation decisions happen almost entirely separately. Promotions depend more on business needs, leadership potential, open positions. Layoff decisions follow completely different criteria. In other words, the rating itself doesn't actually drive much of anything. As strange as that sounds, I've seen it. That's why it's important to understand the role the rating plays inside your organization instead of assuming. The second question, does a particular rating automatically trigger another process? For example, does it require a formal performance improvement plan? Does it create additional oversight? Does it affect someone's ability to remain in their role? If so, that changes the conversation. Those ratings deserve even greater care because of the downstream consequences. And here's the third question. If the answer to both of those questions is no, then how much emotional energy should everyone really spend arguing about the rating itself? Because here's what I've learned. The rating isn't usually the most important part. The conversation is, the coaching is, the clarity is, the growth that comes afterward is. That's where great leaders create value, not by winning debates about ratings, by helping people become better. And that brings me to what I think is the most valuable exercise any manager can do, whether your company has a forced bell curve or doesn't have performance ratings at all. Every manager should complete one exercise before sitting down to write performance reviews. I've used some version of this for years, and honestly, I think it's valuable even if your company never asks you to rank anyone. Here's the exercise. Take out a blank piece of paper, write down every member of your team. Now here's the rule. You don't get any ties. You're going to stack rank the performance of these individuals. I know, some of you are already disagreeing with me. Sherry, I have 2 people performing at exactly the same level. Maybe, but let's keep going. Don't think about who you enjoy working with the most. Don't think about who has the brightest future. Don't think about who's been with the company the longest. Don't think about who works the hardest. These are all important, but that's not the question. The question is much simpler. Who delivered the strongest performance in their current role during this review period? That's it. Now rank them. 1, 2, 3, and all the way down. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. It is supposed to be, because leadership is not always comfortable. Now I know what happens next. You get halfway through the exercise and you stop. You look at 2 names and think, I honestly can't decide. When that happens, I don't want you to quit. I want you to get curious. Ask yourself, if I had to put my own money on one or the other, who would I put one spot higher and why? What's the difference? Maybe one person consistently solves problems without being asked. Maybe another produces excellent work, but still needs more direction. Maybe one person elevates everyone around them. Maybe another does outstanding individual work, but hasn't yet learned how to influence across the organization. Those differences matter, not because you're trying to criticize anyone, because you're trying to understand your team. Now, I want you to ask yourself a second question, and this is the one that usually creates the biggest breakthrough. If the business suddenly changed tomorrow, if budgets were cut, we just simply couldn't cover all of our costs, and we had to eliminate one position, who would it be from your team? I'm not telling you to do layoffs. I'm not asking you to walk into work tomorrow looking for someone to let go. That's not the point. The point is that this question forces clarity, because if you truly had no choice, you would make one. So who would it be and why? Then keep going. What risk would losing that person create? Would the team continue functioning just fine? Would someone else naturally step into those responsibilities? Or would losing that person create a huge gap that would need to be filled immediately? Those answers tell you something important. Now ask yourself another question. Is that person struggling because they lack skill? Or because they lack clarity? Or because they lack confidence? Or because they're simply in the wrong role? Those are 4 completely different coaching conversations, and if we don't know which one we're solving, we're probably coaching the wrong thing. Now let's flip the exercise. Who's at the very top? What are you doing for them? One of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make is assuming their highest performers don't need much attention. They're doing great. They've got it. They don't need me. Actually, they're usually the people most at risk of plateauing because they've mastered the role. They're capable of more, but no one has raised the bar. Think about your own career. Were you most engaged when your work was easy? Probably not. Most of us aren't energized by comfort. We're energized by growth, by learning, by solving bigger problems, by feeling like we're becoming more capable than we were 6 months ago. That's true for your highest performer. It's true for the person in the middle. It's true for the person who's struggling. Every person on your team should have something they're intentionally working to improve. Every person. Not that every person should be on a performance improvement plan. That's something different. I'm talking about a growth plan. Something they're stretching towards. Something they're practicing. Something they'll be better at 6 months from now than they are today, including you. Because if your team doesn't see you growing, why would they? I think this is where many organizations unintentionally miss the real opportunity. Performance reviews can become about assigning a rating, checking a box, completing the paperwork, moving on. But leadership was never supposed to be about paperwork. Leadership is about helping people grow. The rating isn't the destination. It's simply one piece of information along the journey. Here's another thought. Sometimes managers tell me, Sherry, everyone on my team is a strong performer. I usually believe them. You probably do have a strong team. But then I ask another question. Compared to what? Compared to last year? Compared to the average employee? Compared to the expectations you set? Or compared to what's actually possible? Those are very different standards. Because here's something I've noticed. The best leaders raise expectations every year. Not dramatically, not unfairly, not in a way that feels impossible, but enough that everyone continues growing. Think about professional athletes. Winning one championship doesn't mean practice stops. Olympic athletes don't say, I won last year, so I'll train the same amount this year. The standard keeps moving because they keep improving. Leadership works the same way. If your expectations never evolve, eventually, your team's growth won't either. Now, does that mean that people should feel like the goalposts are constantly moving? No, that would be frustrating. The expectations should be clear. The feedback should be frequent. The support should be real. The coaching should be ongoing. Nothing in the performance review should come as a surprise. In fact, here's a sentence I'd love every manager listening to remember. The biggest problem isn't the forced bell curve. The biggest problem is waiting until December to distinguish performance. If someone receives feedback for the first time during their annual review, you know you've waited too long. We don't save coaching for performance review season. We coach all year, which means that when the mid-year review or the year-end review finally arrives, very little is actually new. We've been talking about opportunities for improvement throughout the year. And now the rating simply reflects a conversation that's already been happening over that time period. That's exactly how it should be. So let's finish now with what I hope every leader takes away from today. A performance rating is not a verdict. It's not a judgment on someone's value. It's not a prediction of their future. It's information. Think about when your child comes home from school with a report card. Most good parents don't look at one grade and say, well, I guess you're just bad at math. Of course not. We say, okay, this tells us where to focus next. We encourage them. We help them. We find a tutor if they need one. We practice. The grade isn't the destination. It's simply a data point. Performance ratings should work the same way. When someone receives a lower rating, their first reaction is often emotional. They may feel singled out, embarrassed, even ashamed. As leaders, one of our responsibilities is to normalize that feeling without minimizing it. You might say, hey, I know this wasn't the rating you hoped for. I also want you to know that this isn't where your story ends. This is simply showing us where we're going to focus together next. Do you hear the difference? One conversation says, here's your rating. The other says, here's your growth plan. One looks backward, one looks forward. That's leadership. Every rating should come with two things: a clear explanation of why and an equally clear path for how to improve it. Your employees shouldn't leave wondering, what did I do wrong? They should leave knowing, here's exactly what success looks like over the next 6 months. That's fair. That's motivating. And it's something they can take action on, because ultimately, that's what leadership is. It's helping people become more capable than they believed that they could be. So if you find yourself working inside a forced bell curve this year, don't spend your energy wishing the system were different. Spend your energy becoming the kind of leader who makes the system less important. Coach consistently. Raise expectations thoughtfully. Recognize excellence. Develop potential. Have the difficult conversations when they're needed. If you do those things throughout the year, the performance rating becomes exactly what it was meant to be: a data point, a summary, not a surprise. Everyone receives growth areas where they can improve. That's the leader I invite you to become. And if you're already leading that way, keep going. Your people may not remember every rating that they've ever received, but they'll remember the manager who believed in them enough to help them grow and were willing to tell them the difficult things to get them to a better spot. If you know another leader who's preparing for performance review season, or who might be up in arms about the forced bell curve, send this episode their way. I think it'll help them approach these conversations with a little more confidence and a little more clarity. And while you're at it, download my leadership playbook for the guide to performance reviews, both on the receiving end for yourself and as the leader for your people. Until next time.
Looking for support in applying the principles and strategies in today's episode? Sherry coaches clients one-on-one as their trusted confidant and advisor, helping each client create the work and life they had only dreamed of. To schedule your complimentary career strategy session, go to sherrygregoff.com/apply to book time with her today. It's one simple step that can change everything.